Before I even launch into my story, I'm about 80% sure that the park manager and my neighbor in this story were involved romantically. I can't prove it, but after everything that happened, it sure feels that way. Also, I'm not some polished writer. That may present itself several times in what I'm about to tell you. I do a lot of traveling for work, and I live mostly full-time in an RV. I'm going to tell the story exactly how it happened. It was chaotic, frustrating, and honestly, kind of surreal. For the last 9 months, I'd been staying at the same RV park in Nevada. It wasn't fancy, but it was affordable for me. And during snowbird season, every decent park around was completely full. I'd also just gotten a new job in the area, so moving wasn't exactly convenient. From the beginning, management at this park had issues with me over something stupid. Months earlier, there had been a minor mistake on some paperwork from a one-night stay, one number off on the registration for my RV. They tried to use that as grounds to not rent to me later. Even the actual owner of the park reportedly said that things like that didn't matter, since all the correct info was already in the registration system. But the office staff kept holding on to it like they wanted a reason to get me out of there. There were other petty incidents too. I'd get ignored at the front office. They once called the cops on me because I had argued with them. I'm not joking about that. But I figured cheap rent that I could pay over the phone. And I don't really have any plans for leaving anytime soon, so all of this misbehavior, I just tolerated it. Then there was my neighbor. From day one, I could tell this dude was absolutely miserable. He's one of those guys who radiates bitterness without even having to say a word. This guy wouldn't seek out conversations with me per se, but anytime we were outside together, he would stare at me and my 2 older cats. Now my cats mostly stayed on our porch. They'd lounge in the sun and occasionally wandered a little bit, but never far away. About 6 weeks back, after 9 months of living next to us with hardly more than a hello, this guy snapped. My wife was outside washing the car when he stormed over, got in her face, and started screaming that he had found cat poop in the dirt behind his old bus, this 1979 thing sitting on blocks. Now he was going to set traps and poison whatever animal was doing it. Obviously, he thought my cats were to blame. Management showed up almost immediately, either because they heard the yelling or because he had called them. Well, instead of hearing our side, they pulled him aside privately and started talking to him like he was a toddler. Lots of honeys and sweethearts, that kind of thing. Then they turned to us and said basically, it's his space. He can trap whatever he wants. If your animals go over there, that's your problem. Now, here's the insane part. This RV park had stray cats everywhere. So many that management actually kept feeders near the front office. I told them that trapping cats was illegal. They smugly told me that they'd had residents doing this for a long time, and they knew exactly what they were doing. They even told me to call animal control if I didn't believe them. So I did. Animal control told me the traps themselves were legal. But since the guy had openly threatened to poison my cats, I also called the police and filed a report. If anything were to happen, I wanted it documented. Apparently that made him furious. At this point, I really wouldn't say revenge was much in my mind. In fact, I hadn't laid much thought to it. I just wanted to protect our cats. We got them microchipped. Then we went to Lowe's, bought a trap of our own, and trained the cats to avoid them. The funniest part of this entire story is that it only took one lesson to pound that home. They saw the trap one time, got spooked, and from then on, they treated anything resembling a trap like it was cursed. Meanwhile, 5 days later, management taped an eviction notice to my door. Not a legal eviction through a court, a self-help eviction. Basically, get out now, or they'd be shutting my power off on a certain date. I told them that if they touched the power, I'd call the police immediately. You can't just illegally evict tenants because you don't like them. There are proceedings for this, and even more, I had receipts of their behavior. I had a video of them harassing me, video of them refusing my paperwork in the past, videos of them encouraging the trap situation, and videos of them threatening me. I learned early on that RV parks sometimes bully people because most folks, they'll just pick up and leave. Well, not me. No chance at that. Once the manager finally spoke to the actual owner, she realized she'd stepped in it. They couldn't evict me unless I stopped paying rent, because they'd never given me a written lease, written rules, or anything consistent. Instead, she just tried another tactic. She told me I was no longer allowed inside the office except to get mail, and I had to pay rent over the phone by card, which I was doing anyway, but that's petty stuff. Meanwhile, the neighbor just escalated. He kept adding more and more traps. 4 at first, then 8, 12. Some were literally a foot away from my property line, and he still hadn't caught a thing. Then by pure luck, while shopping for another trap to keep training my cats, I ran into a property manager from another park. I explained my situation, and he told me something interesting. In Nevada, trapping wildlife without the proper permit can be illegal due to an abundance of protected species. That got my attention, so I dove in and did some research. Sure enough, Nevada Fish and Wildlife, they didn't mess around. And that's when the semblance of a plan began to form in my head. I told management, it's fine, let him keep the traps up, because I knew my cats would never go near them. But I also knew that this guy was spiraling, and the longer he didn't get his way, the angrier he got. He started revving his Harley for 45 minutes at a time, multiple times a day, sitting there blasting the radio. He cut lumber with a chop saw into tiny pieces, then stand 10 feet back and throw them into a steel trailer just to make noise. My bedroom window was about 2 feet away from the circus, and I worked nights. He knew this. I filmed everything though. I had around 3 gigabytes of video on my phone, and that was only part of it. That's when I put up a dummy security camera facing his front door. For whatever reason, this broke him. One day, on camera, he got too close and shoved my wife. Completely unwarranted, and yet perfect for what I had planned. Now I had what I needed for a civil harassment case, but still, I waited. Every few days I'd glance over and see another trap added to his little kingdom. Eventually, he got that number up to 15. His tiny RV space looked like a minefield made entirely of cat traps. And that's when I called Nevada Fish and Wildlife. I emailed them photos. They showed up the next day. And unlike local management, these people took it very seriously. They confiscated each and every trap. Then they fined him. $1,000 per trap. 15 traps total. That's $15K in fines. Afterward, the manager called me demanding to know why I'd done such a thing. I asked her how she was so sure that I had done anything at all, that those traps were actually a violation of the law, and this was his problem. Then I told her that the fines weren't the biggest issue here, that I was building a harassment case against both her and her little friend. Now it's funny how quickly attitudes changed after that. Remember how I told you it was snowbird season and all the other RV parks were full? Well, this one was like that too. It was expected to be full all winter, and there wasn't a single spot available anywhere else in the park. But miraculously, that changed almost overnight. Yeah, suddenly I was offered a different location for my RV. I wasn't just moved, I was upgraded. It was one of the best spots in the entire park, near the $1 million RVs, close to the pool and the hot tub, and about a 200-foot walk from the on-site bar and pizza place. Turns out, space magically opens up when you cost the wrong people 15 grand. It's wild because I didn't have to scream or fight. I didn't even have to elevate that harassment claim. I just let miserable people expose themselves and document everything they did. I learned the law better than they did. And then I let the proper organizations handle the rest. Being that I was now clear on the other side of the property, I didn't have to worry about running into the belligerent neighbor anymore. And because I had less and less reason to go to the office, I didn't even have to deal with the property manager either. I ended up staying at this park through the next season and a half before I picked up and rolled off into the sunset. But the joy of the revenge and all the fallout that came from it, well, I still sit and think about that pretty regularly. And I'll be damned if it doesn't bring a smile to my face each and every time. The town where this happened is a small one, and the school that I went to is over 70 years old. My grandpa and father are also alumni of this school. I'm going to start off by saying that several alumni from this school are really successful, and the school itself has had a long history of being charitable and also offering amazing retirement benefits to teachers, depending on how long they've worked there. My great-grandfather donated some of his property to the school when it was being constructed, and he was an advisor and a part of the school board at the time. The school was an all-boys school up until 1996, when they had their first co-ed class, and it's a fully co-ed school now. The school also offers classes from kindergarten up to high school, split off into 2 buildings. The first one houses kindergarten through 5th, and the other has classrooms for 6th through 12th. I'm going to introduce you to a particular teacher. For this story, we'll call her MD. MD was my dad's math teacher when he started high school. She was a young woman just finishing her teaching degree, and she had a master's in math and chemistry. At that point, she was the most qualified teacher that the school had. Unfortunately, MD was just a straight nasty person. She walked into the class and the students were expected to be sitting in ready mode, back straight, legs together, hands on lap, with only the needed textbook and a pencil to take notes on the margins. The class was expected to greet her with a good morning or good afternoon when she walked in, and she assigned tons of weekend homework. She would simply stop teaching for the entire hour-long class if one person spoke without having asked to speak. Couldn't get up to get water without her permission, couldn't go to the restroom unless she finally saw your hand raised and asked you to speak. There were multiple cases of people complaining against that, but with her being the most qualified teacher there, the school board didn't take action. Instead, they supported her by saying that this would help discipline the students. But this isn't even the beginning of it. Her tests were incredibly hard, and with the class being full of teenage boys, they would talk, and even one of them doing so would cause her to stop teaching and not teach until the next class. She would then lecture on a different topic, completely skipping the part from the class before. Suffice to say, before the finals, the entire class was in a panic state, trying to self-study enough to at least pass the class. My dad ended up getting a 41%. Our education system said you failed the class if you had under a 40, so he was relieved that he had passed. But when he went through his answer sheet, my dad noticed that his totaling was incorrect, and that he in fact had a 49 on that test. He raised his hand, and after about 5 minutes or so of him just sitting there in his seat calmly, he was called on and MD asked what the problem was. My dad told her that there was a totaling mistake in the final and that he actually scored a 49. This somehow offended her. Instead of calling him forth and checking his paper, MD decided that it was simply impossible for her, a master's in math, to make a mistake in something as simple as addition. She waved him off, and my dad was shocked, and she just calmly turned to the next person with a question. My dad, not being happy, got up from his seat, which was basically considered a crime in her class, and put the paper on MD's desk. He started totaling his points loudly. MD incredulously watched him do that and was at a loss for words. Though when he was done adding, you could see her face was flushed and she was furious. She looked madly from the paper to my dad and then back at the paper, before suddenly flashing a cruel smile across her face. "Oh, okay. I see the mistake, but that's no excuse for this behavior. This awards a subtraction of 10 points from your final." The class that was amazed at her first sentence went back to having grim looks, and my dad stood there, jaw dropped. Now he had 39 points and had officially failed the class. Instead of responding and making the situation worse, he simply took his final, packed his backpack, and left the classroom. That's when he went and spoke to his grandfather, who was on the school board, but he said he couldn't do anything since grades were completely in the hands of the teacher concerned. My dad took the L and decided that revenge wasn't worth the trouble and switched classes. He dropped chem and took up econ, and that was the last interaction that he ever had with this teacher. Well, jumping forward several years, when I was in freshman year, starting up high school, my younger brother was in the 7th grade. For this story, we'll call my brother B. At the time, we had an auditorium under construction, and the library was newly renovated, so a teacher was assigned to chaperone the younger class students to the library. My younger brother's class, unfortunately, got MD as their chaperone. My dad had specifically instructed me to be very careful around MD, and I was on the lookout, but my younger brother had no idea just who he was dealing with. Before summer, our library allows students to take any 2 books of their choice for the break. So when my brother walked past MD to the librarian and was stopped by MD, he was truly confused. He had an Enid Blyton book and a copy of Backyard Science Experiments. Both my younger brother and I are really good at science-related topics, and he had been waiting for summer break to do some cool science experiments at home with me. MD spoke up and said, "Wait a minute, what book do you have there?" "It's a storybook and a backyard science book, ma'am." "What are you going to do with that backyard science book?" The teacher turned to the other library staff. "I taught his father. No brains in there. You would have no idea what to do with this book. You should just leave it for someone who does." And with that, she snatched the book from his hands and walked away, the library staff giving awkward laughs behind her. When B came looking for me crying, I was furious. I was really popular at school. I won quizzes and debates and represented the school in national competitions. My friends and I had an entire showcase of trophies at our school with our names embossed on them, and most teachers loved us. Man, the vice principal of the school and our group were on a first-name basis, just to give you some frame of reference. But when B told me what had happened, I was dumbfounded. I had no idea how to react, but for the moment, I went to the library and got another copy of the backyard science book to console my brother with. Then we were out for summer vacation, and I didn't dwell too much on it. Side note, during the summer, we attended a science summit, and my school friends and I won prizes for having the most efficient hydraulic gear-based pulley system and the second fastest chemical fuel race boat. This was before I ever took high school chemistry or physics. This was announced in the school assembly the first day after summer break. Once we came back for fall, I had a chem class with MD. This was also right after the assembly, where my group was given our award. So we go to the chem lab, and MD is at the lab instructor's desk setting up an experiment designed to liberate hydrochloric acid fumes in a gas flask. Some moments passed by, and we could see that some mistake had been done, and there was no reaction in the mixture. But MD somehow got the idea that turning on the Bunsen burner on full blast would help the experiment. After collecting the gas for about 3 minutes, which is 2.5 minutes too long since hydrochloric acid fumes are toxic if inhaled, she's satisfied. She then pulls up the flask to show the class how we do experiments. Cherry on top is when she opens the flask up and brings it uncomfortably close to the girl beside me. "Does it smell pungent?" she asked. The girl awkwardly smells it and then jerks away. Now, to someone who has no clue, that would be a plausible confirmation, but I knew that it was complete horseshit. I could see that the girl knew about the pungent fumes and cringed away on reflex, and not because it was actually pungent. I don't know why I did it, but at that moment, I snorted loudly. MD instantly zooms in on me, walking toward me with her face contorting into an ugly expression. Then she goes, "Is there something funny you'd care to share with us?" Now, I knew I messed up, but I was also angry. The person in front of me had bullied my younger brother and my father. I remembered that, and suddenly all my verbal sensors were shut down. I said, "I think we both know that she didn't smell anything pungent. The experiment you just did was a failure." "Oh, so you're saying that you know more than me?" She turns to the class. "He knows more than me. You know what? I'll step down. Why don't you teach the class?" "Me?" I jumped at the opportunity. "Oh, absolutely." To the shock of everyone watching, I walked up to the podium and, while maintaining eye contact with MD, "First thing to remember, class, turn to experiment 1 of your lab textbook. Read all the warnings. The gas is pungent and poison." MD pipes up. "How dare you? Has no one taught you manners? This isn't a roadside shack, and you would do well to remember that, or else you're gonna have a couple broken bones." Note, I was born in a different country, so this was said in my home language. But if you want the exact translations, it was, "I'll break your limbs and feed them to you." She's absolutely furious. She grabs me by the hand and proceeds to drag me to the principal's office. On the way there, we cross the vice principal's office, and he sees MD dragging me away and runs out into the hallway. He wants to know what's going on here. And before I can say anything, MD starts ranting to him about how disrespectful and unacceptable my class behavior is. She's so worked up that she's heaving by the end of her spiel. The vice principal gives me a searching look and then responds with, "Go back to class, MD. I'll handle this." We head back to his office and he offers me a seat. What actually happened in class? He asks this with a sigh. I tell him exactly what unfolded. Once he hears my side of the story, he looks at me incredulously and asks me if I really went to the podium and started lecturing the class. I peer up and see the gobsmacked look on the VP's normally reserved face. Imagine someone who looks like a male Professor McGonagall being completely shocked. I couldn't stop myself. It started with a snicker, which turned into full-blown laughter. To my surprise, the vice principal was also smiling widely at that. He shook his head, and that reserved expression was right back where it belonged. He said, "I know that what happened there had you concerned for class safety, but that's no reason for such disruptive behavior. Aside from that, I'm personally going to investigate what happened in that class, and if MD is found to be intentionally forcing students to inhale harmful chemicals, she'll be sacked immediately. Oh, and you're supposed to hand over a written apology to MD about this behavior, so get moving." I sighed this time and headed back to class, and I really thought that there was a chance I had ended MD's career. But I was wrong. She changed the story so it looked like she had purposely done the experiment wrong and was about to reprimand the girl for inhaling what could have been harmful chemical. MD pulled one on me and had me look like I was just an insolent child who thought that he knew everything by reading a chapter of the book. And here, I stopped myself. This event was me just going in head-on with a teacher who had been in the school for longer than 35 years. Now, I knew that I needed to help myself and my brother. I needed to get rid of this lady. My dad knew about what happened in school and he wanted me to not engage MD. He said that it wasn't worth it, but by now, I was in the game. She had played her card. It was now my turn. I don't know what made it so that she had such a problem with my dad and my younger brother. They were quiet and hardworking students. I felt she had something against our family, and I was convinced that my younger brother would have to deal with the problem if I somehow messed up and got expelled or made a worse enemy out of her. This was now war, and I had a plan. I started to act really sheepish around her, and made it a point to stay back after class and ask her questions in the most polite way possible. I was a kid who was guilty of not understanding the plans of elders. I portrayed myself as an amazing student who MD had succeeded in humbling. I slowly but surely made my way into the category best described by the term bootlicker. It hurt me inside to do it, but what I had planned, if this went well, made me lightheaded with anticipation. I was in it to win it. I conceded defeat in a fight in order to emerge victorious in the war. 2 years later, I'm now a junior. My younger brother just started high school, and he was taking the chem class with MD. I was the highest scorer in chem, and was a pet to MD. She had started to like the way that I portrayed myself, and made me the lab assistant for that year. 2 of my best friends knew what I had planned. Everyone else in class hated me for being the teacher's pet and getting straight A's when the next highest grade was a B-. Everything was going according to plan. On the first day of class, I replaced her stool, one of the 3-legged ones, with a broken one. This was supposed to be the first in a series of pranks that would hit her that day. She came to class and went to take her seat, and boy, she fell. Well, somehow she hit her hand on the wall and cried out, and I know that must have hurt, especially because she was overweight and came in with a lot of force. I knew that this couldn't be traced back to me. I smiled on the inside as I rushed to help her. I ran and fetched her another chair, while inside the classroom, the freshmen were trying their best not to laugh. When I got back from the room that had extra stools, I walked into the sight of her screaming like a banshee. But what got me furious was that she was screaming directly at my younger brother. Apparently, she had said something like, "Stupid stools and stupid lab assistant fools," to which my brother had responded with, "It's not my brother's fault you're too heavy for the stool." Though I loved him for it, he really needed to learn where to come to my aid. But then, I didn't do much. I just replaced the chair silently, while also telepathically trying to tell my brother to calm down. Nothing else of concern happened that day, till the time when school was over and the teachers were heading back. Stage 2 was now in motion. We all heard a loud bang, and immediately the large crowd of students nearby all headed toward the teacher's parking lot. We saw MD's car smoking and her exhaust blown right off. Keep in mind, this was an older car, and we had decided to block off the exhaust with clay that had hardened off over the course of a sunny day. Well, that car had to be towed, and she went home with another teacher that day. MD didn't show up to school for about 2 days after, but she did show up to school on the third day, which was a half day, because our country celebrates Teachers' Day, of all things. It's a tradition that students go to their teachers, current and old, and wish them the best, give them cards, gifts, etc. This was by far the most ambitious prank pulled in the school that I know of. The 2 days she was gone, we went around telling people to not visit her on Teachers' Day. It helped that a lot of my friends and I were some of the most popular people in school, and with the other cool guys and girls agreeing to that, we spread the word and got confirmation that no one from the entire class of my year was going to go and wish her the best on Teachers' Day. But what actually happened was something that no one could have expected. I guess it could have been because we acted so fanatical about it that our classmates spread the word to all their friends, and not a single person in the school went to her on Teachers' Day. It was the most amazing feeling of accomplishment that I'd ever had. She had made this situation for herself by being the nastiest person I'd ever seen. It was no surprise that people were fine with doing this to her. For the first time in the 70 years of our school, a teacher had not a single well-wisher on Teachers' Day. Well, things are never perfect, and as it so happened, word of what had transpired got to her. The next day, I had just set up the lab. The freshmen were getting settled in, and here comes MD, anger radiating from her in waves. She walks up to me, and I get the hardest slap I've ever received in my life, right across the face. I'd hate to admit it, but I left a blue mark on my cheek, and my nose and my lip bleeding. My younger brother, who saw that happening, ran towards me, but my shock slowly subsided and I smiled a bloody smile that likely scared him. I told him to go get the vice principal. 20 minutes later, I was in the nurse's office, nurse wiping my lip and holding a cloth to my nose. The vice principal comes in with the principal and 2 cops in tow. They tell me that my parents have been informed and ask me if I would like to talk about it now or once my parents get there. I say that I can answer their questions as soon as my lip is bandaged. So I tell them about the cases of bullying against my brother and myself. I also tell them that she's truly incompetent as a teacher. I tell the principal that he could check the school average in science subjects. And sure as I guessed, in the average scores in the national exams, we had physics and biology come in at a 92 and a 90, with chemistry at a surprising 76. Topping that off with assault charges, she lost her license to teach, just 2 years before she was set to retire. And with that, she lost the amazing retirement benefits that the school had offered. Her car also had no insurance. That's not all though. One could ask what would be worse. Well, consider this. The fall she had off the stool had her go to the hospital for an x-ray of her wrist and hip. The hip was fine. The wrist, fractured. But the x-ray showed another thing. I don't think it's normal for anyone to laugh when someone is diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. But if I'm being honest here, I did. A little later on, I actually met her only living family member, a nephew of hers who had long cut all contact off, but he'd been contacted by the police and the hospital. He'd flown back to our country from the US for this, and that's where I found out the truth. MD's mom was my great-granddad's niece. Through my great-granddad's younger brother, who had stolen money from our family and tried to kill my great-granddad. Well, he was disowned. Good shit. And no one knew this entire time. Not that anyone would care. Happy that that nasty woman is out of our lives. For good this time, because apparently she died a couple years back with no one by her side. I hate to be that person that wishes bad things on people. But if you're a bad person, those things are earned, not wished upon. Trigger warning here. Talking about violence and some more unsavory type things. Backstory to this. My grandfather went to prison in his late teens or early 20s. We didn't talk about it in the family, but it must have been for something serious because he wound up spending 11 years behind bars. This was prison back in the 30s and 40s, so to say that it wasn't easy, that's putting it mildly. Anyway, when he was released, he came out with a terrible temper and being much more prone to violence. Well, on to the story. This happened in the early 60s in the rural Midwest. Grandpa and my grandma raised their kids the only way they knew how, picking vegetables as farmers. In most of these little agricultural towns that they lived in, cops really wouldn't venture around. It seemed that the people in town sort of just handled the problems on their own and in their own ways. In one of these towns, there was this POS who, it had become known, frequently raped his daughters and then would sell them off to his friends in town. It was kind of an open secret, but no one that mattered had the proof. So most of the parents of the town, my grandparents included, just told their kids to not go to that family's house and to stay away at all costs. Well, apparently, one day POS makes an offhanded comment to another man in town about how my grandfather was sitting on a gold mine with all those pretty young daughters that he had. Shortly after this exchange, and unbeknownst to POS, that guy comes and tells Grandpa what POS had said, and Grandpa puts out the word to have POS stop by that afternoon. Well, POS comes to the property and Grandpa is talking to him, says that he should have POS over for supper that night before asking what his favorite meal is. At this point in time, POS has no idea what's going on. But the guy tells him that fried chicken and fried potatoes were his go-to meal. Grandpa says, "Great. Hey, I'll get my wife to make that and you come back over in a few hours." POS agrees and drives off. Well, after this, Grandma, who's visibly shaking, says she doesn't want to make this meal and asks my grandpa what he thinks he's doing. That's when my grandpa tells her, cool and as calm as ever, "Honey, just make the food. Every man deserves a delicious, home-cooked final meal." Well, a few hours later, POS comes back around and Grandma has made a full-on spread. She was always a great cook. At this point, all of the kids were at my grandma's parents' house. POS makes himself a huge plate and digs on in. He's enjoying every bite, making small talk with Grandpa the entire time. Well, after he finished off his second plate, Grandpa asks him, did he get his fill? POS replies with, "Oh yeah, you're a lucky man. Your wife is a great But before he could get that statement out, my grandpa cold-cocked him in the face. That wasn't the only blow either. Grandpa beat this man senseless throughout the house, spilling out onto the front porch. And as he was there beating on him on the front porch, most of the other fathers in the area came by to watch. Once Grandpa was done, the man wasn't moving much, and the porch was now soaked in blood. Grandma told us that for the 6 months that they lived there after this incident, she could never get the bloodstains completely out. At this point, my grandfather is clearly done with this man, and a few of the other fathers walked into the yard and said, "Hey, we'll take this from here." And rather unceremoniously, 3 neighborhood fathers grab POS and drag him to one of their cars. Now, moving forward, Grandma could never tell us if this guy died or not, but POS's family was still there in that town when my grandparents and their kids moved to the next town over. This was months later, and that family had no clue where their husband or dad was. My guess is that if he didn't die from his injuries, then those other fathers had themselves a nice little party that night. Now we're 60 years in the future. I think most players involved in this story are long gone, or certainly on their way there. Police were never involved. No courts ever heard any cases. It was just small-town farmer justice there. And I don't know if anyone ever shed a tear over POS disappearing.